Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Marcus, and this is another conversation. And I have a very favorite friend of mine here with me today, Joanna Infeld. Welcome, Joanna.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So great to be with you. And I must say that you've been a teacher of mine through the years, and I've gained so much wisdom from you in so many areas. And I'd love to ask you today, what are some of the wisdoms that you've picked up through the ages? I know that you are a big researcher into the stages of life, particularly for women. And I was wondering if you could share some of that with me.
Certainly, it has been a research of mine, and I do find that in workshops which I have conducted, that there are certain stages of life that people go through, that everybody goes through, men and women, but especially women seem to be interested in the subject. So this is something I have studied, and I have identified 7 stages that a person goes through in their life, from the beginning till the end. And for example, if you take the midlife crisis, which I have renamed to be called the midlife opportunity, it
Love
is
it.
something that everybody does go through in their midlife, around 30, between 35 and 38, somewhere there. Of course, everybody's different, so nobody starts at the very same time as everybody else, because it varies. Some people are late bloomers, so called. Some people develop early, but everybody goes through those stages. So I think it's good to know what those stages are, because then you can work with those energies as they change throughout life. Because obviously a child has got much more energy than an old person, but if we work with those energies, we can enhance the energy that we have and that we utilize in our life.
So if we look at these different stages of life, and what you're saying is if we are prepared in a way, or not even prepared, because you really can't prepare for life until you go through it. But if we can have some sort of understanding that these stages do occur and that they are natural and they're coming, then how does this support your endeavor as you mature and move through these different ages?
Absolutely. Knowing that these stages exist and that there are certain energies that go with each stage, I think is very helpful, because then a person can work with those energies and realize that throughout life, the energy changes. So, for example, in the midlife, there is a kind of turnaround where the energy that you work with begins to wane. But if you know that, then you can do certain exercises and have prayers and various ceremonies that can enhance the energy that you work with. So, for example, a child, and I liken each stage of one's journey throughout life to a color of the rainbow, which is, I think, very helpful because it works. So, for example, a child would go with red, and red is a very kind of vibrant color, makes you want to do things, being athletic, being experimenting, trying things. A child is so energized that they once did this experiment where they hired an athlete to do everything a child did, around a 10-year-old child, and he couldn't keep up, even though he was an athlete, because there was so much that the child would do within a day. So that's the first stage is red, but then the next stage is like a mixture between red and yellow, which is orange. And orange is very much dedicated to the discovery of what one can and cannot do, and also the discovery of sex, which is a big thing in the teenage years. So we're talking here about the teenage, between say 11 and 22. And the reason I chose the number 11 for each stage is because that is a sun cycle. So it seems a natural cycle to look at. And again, everybody's different. So some people might have a longer time in their childhood years, and not so much time in their teenage years, and so it works different for each person. So then we go into the yellow, which is very much connected to one's emotion. And that would be the time to establish oneself in a relationship, to build a family, to start one's independent life, because up to really that time, one is dependent on one's parents. And there is that support that the parents offer, or the caregiver, or whoever it might be. So that's the yellow stage. And of course, then we go into the midlife, which could be likened to green, which is a mixture of yellow and blue. So this is a point where people ask the question, where is my life going? Because it gives you time. The children might be not grown up, but independent enough to have a bit more time for yourself. And so it's a time to really look at one's life and begin to identify what one's purpose is. So that is like a turning point where energy begins to wane. So again, a person would need to learn to work with that fact, and the fact that one does not have the same kind of energy. Like when you're a teenager or a young adult in one's early 20s, you could stay up all night, you could dance all night, you could drink all night and still go to work and do a job properly. But after like 30s, in midlife, one begins to realize that the body is not forever and that death will come. And when I even say that word, it's got a kind of dread with it, dread with death, but it will come to everybody on this planet in 100 years or so, probably a bit more. They won't be here. So life is temporary. And I think it's at midlife that one really realizes that it's not happening to everybody else, but it's also happening to me. Yeah. So then comes, after the midlife, comes blue and indigo and violet, which are like more spiritual times, if that's the way a person is inclined. So one discovers that one needs to have a purpose, or that there's more to life than just looking after children, which by then will be grown up and go into the world and start on their own. So it's a time of really deciding who wants to be, and what kind of legacy one wants to leave behind. I've worked with a lot of people who write their books at that stage of life, and they want to leave back to their children and to the world something of substance. So it's a time of adding up one's life and putting it together so that those left behind, when one does go, and have a good, easy passage, and everything's tidy. So it's a time of tidying up and defining one's life. So it can be an exciting time, even though it's coming closer to that final departure. Yeah. But we don't know where we're going. You see, each religion has its view of where we're going and what will happen to us. But really, I think who to believe is those who have had near-death experiences and have actually died and come back and written books about it, because that is a fascinating subject in itself. Where are we going? Yeah. Because I do believe we're going somewhere.
Yeah, hopefully so. Yeah. So just one comment. I find it so interesting when you said that, like, what was it? The yellow and the orange, or two of the colors mold to be one color. So it's not like a defined line, like you're sort of going from, one stage to the other, but they kind of meld together. I find that fascinating because nothing is, that defined. And the other thing I would like to ask you is, when you talk about energies, the energy of youth and the different stages, I believe you're not only talking about the physical energy, but other kinds of energies that join our lives.
That's true. So when we're born, there's clearly an energy with that child, and that energy will change throughout his or her life, so that in every stage, it's good to realize that the energy will change. I mean, once you discover, for example, sex in your teenage years, life is not the same.
It's true.
It's totally changed. You're fascinated by this other person or whoever you might fancy. And you learn to deal with that, and you learn to have relationships that are meaningful. And then when you go into the world and you need to make a living for yourself, that's a completely different energy. And it allows a person to become independent, have her or his own thoughts, not be so dependent on parents or caregivers. So the energy does change, and then in the later years, it's much more spiritual. It's more adding up what one's life is, what it amounts to, what one wants to leave behind as one's legacy. And if you look at an old person and then you look at a young person, there's two different energies completely. So yes, energy is really an important ingredient in our life. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So I think it's an important approach to understand one's life and what one can and cannot do.
Yeah. Wonderful. You've given me, and I'm sure everybody who will be viewing this recording, so much to think about as we move on in our life. And the thought comes, like, we have choices. Like, we have
Yeah.
choices of what kind of energies we want to connect to as we get older, for sure, because we become much more conscious.
Absolutely. In my workshops, I do this exercise where I ask people to write a letter to a younger person about the stage that they've already been through and have certain understanding about and knowledge about and wisdom about. And it's really an amazing exercise because everybody that I've ever worked with comes up with incredible wisdoms for the younger generation. And it might be, like an old person in their 70s writing to a person in their teenage years or in their 20s or 30s. And if you go back to how you were and certain things I'm sure you wished you knew that now you do, and you can help other people on their way. I
Yeah.
think it's a great exercise.
Yeah. Amazing. Wow. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Joanna. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it too.
Hope to see you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.